Welcome to the Speaking of Influence podcast with virtual business speaker, presentation skills and influence coach, John Ball. Remember to like and subscribe. The Speaking of Influence podcast is uploaded and distributed using Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout makes it really easy to get your podcast started and out to a wide audience with lots of tips and useful tools to help you on your way. If you're interested, check the link in the show notes and start your podcast today. Welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have with me a guest who I've been looking forward to speaking with for a long time now. He is multiple book author and also the co-founder of Dent Global. He's written books like Key Person of Influence, Oversubscribed, 24 Assets, and so I'm sure there's more good stuff on the way as well. But I know I've read many of his books many times over, so I'm really happy today to introduce Daniel Priestley.
Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm so happy you agreed to come on. You were one of those people who's on my dream list of guests that I'd like to get on. So when you agreed, I was really pumped.
Let's hope I live up to it.
No pressure at all. Daniel, for people who may not have come across you and what you do before, I think I encountered you quite a while back, but I think that was maybe before Dent Global. So explain a little bit about what it is you do and your business for the audience.
So my main business is Dent Global. We run a business accelerator for entrepreneurs, fast growth companies. We operate in the Asia Pacific region, in the EMEA region, and also in Americas. So we actually have a major office in Sydney, London, and Toronto. And we work with about 3,000 fast growth companies globally, put them through an acceleration program. Part of it is about discovering their value. Part of it's about becoming a key person of influence. Part of it is about creating scalability. So that's the main thing that I do. And we have an amazing team of about 50 to 60 people. We've got our own in-house video production business, our own in-house book publishing company, and IT services company. So we've got a lot of in-house capability that supports the accelerator programs. We launched in 2010. And we've had some of the world's most amazing and successful and celebrated entrepreneurs who actually teach the program. So most of our entrepreneurs who are on the program are learning from people who have built and sold companies, who have been best-selling authors, people who have hired hundreds of people. So they're learning from really fascinating and interesting practitioners of entrepreneurship as well.
Great. So other than your own books, you're publishing other entrepreneurs as well?
Yeah. So at the moment, we publish about 400 books.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. So I think when I first encountered you was maybe even some of your early days in the UK. I'm not sure quite when you moved over to the UK, but we met. I don't expect you to remember, but we met a couple of times at some triumphant events gigs in London back in those days.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's quite a long time ago, but it got me familiar with who you were, and we got connected up on social media. So I've been following you, you're pretty active on social media and you post a lot of good stuff. I interact with you on Twitter sometimes. And so it's always good to see someone who's really not just doing the business, but sharing stuff and asking questions with people, interacting.
Twitter gave me the notification that yesterday that I signed up 13 years ago. So quite literally a third of my life I've been compulsively tweeting. Kind of weird how 13 years later, bang.
Yeah. I've gone from someone who almost used to be exclusively just on Facebook to almost exclusively Twitter and LinkedIn.
Oh, you'll be on TikTok next. I can see what's happening. I can see.
That's it. I'm not very coordinated when it comes to dancing, and I think you have to do dance routines and stuff on TikTok. But I'll work on it.
There's time to work on this.
I want to come back to one of the things that has most impressed me and inspired me from something that you've done, which is your book, Key Person of Influence. And it's one of those books that sometimes you come across a book, for me anyway, where you read it or listen to it, because I like audiobooks, and then you straight away have to listen to it again, which is exactly what I did, and multiple times since then. And for me, it really was an inspiration about really understanding how to get known in any industry, how to really sort of start to stand out. What inspired that book for you?
Well, yeah. So in the 2000s, I launched my first company, which was called Triumphant Events in 2002. And we were up and down the east coast of Australia. We were touring speakers. We were doing what's called roadshow marketing. Roadshow marketing is essentially event marketing. You put the CEO of a company on stage and you roadshow them up and down the country. And they might be launching a product, or they might be talking to existing clients about something new. You know, they might be doing fundraising. We actually launched very successfully a massive national franchise through roadshow. So I had a specialty in roadshow marketing with Triumphant Events, and that company grew very big, very fast. It went from 0 to 10 million of revenue before I was 25. So it was pretty insane. One of the tactics for filling rooms was that we used to hire professional speakers who had a bit of a following, and we knew that if we put them on the stage, they'd wow the audience and give a really great experience. So if you're putting a boring CEO who's not very good at speaking on a stage, you kind of want to have them, you want to have something else on the stage that day as well that kind of makes it worth being at the event. So we used to hire a lot of these kind of professional speakers, best-selling authors, TV personalities, sporting legends or ex-sporting legends. All of those kind of people would take the stage at our events. And I got a great opportunity to spend a lot of time with these people and to see the way their lives run and see the way they work and see what kind of profits they're making behind the scenes. And, you know, you get a real sense, you know, of what they're like. For example, if you're paying 10 grand for someone to speak and they're booked out 3 months in advance, you realize that, you know, they're doing pretty well. So I was behind the scenes seeing a lot of this. And all through the 2000s, right up to 2010, I spent a lot of time around what I would describe as kind of key people of influence, these people that get up on stage. Or I saw them mostly getting up on stage, but they're also in the media and writing books and all that sort of stuff. So the thing that I kept seeing over and over and over again was people thrusting business plans at them. And will you have a percentage of my company? Will you, you know, would you be a figurehead for my business and I'll give you 10% of the company? You know, can you speak at my conference? You know, I'll happily pay the 10 grand, the 20 grand. And then I also saw that they were quite good friends with all the so-called competitors. Like they weren't, you know, what the marketplace might have viewed as competition. They were all having dinners with each other every month and talking and discussing how they might, you know, work together and all those kind of things. So they were all actually frenemies or, you know, or kind of joint venture partners. And I just got this amazing experience seeing behind the scenes. And one thing that I remember thinking in the late 2000s was, how on earth would you compete with someone who has this kind of a brand? So if someone has that personal brand, if someone is that key person of influence, if they can pick up the phone and get through to anyone pretty much, if they want to, or if they've constantly got inbound opportunities, like they're moving at such a different speed to the rest of us that that I just thought to myself, this is just a, you know, until you're a key person of influence, until you move on the inner circle of your industry, your full-time job should be to become one, because there's not a lot, comparatively, there's not a lot of action happening outside of that top 5% of the industry. So I started writing blogs about it. I wrote a blog on a website called Academy. I ended up being the owner and the managing director of Academy. I ended up buying the business.
I remember Academy.
Yeah, I bought the business at one point. So I ended up, at that point, I was a blogger on Academy. I later became the managing director of Academy and the owner. But I wrote a blog on Academy and basically said that, you know, until you're a key person of influence, your full-time job is to become one. And it kind of blew up a bit and got thousands of hits and people commenting and kind of got a good traction and people wanting to know more and what was my opinion on this. And essentially I said that you've got to write a book, you've got to have a very clear pitch, you've got to have a product ecosystem behind you. So I started just unpacking that in the blog.
Yeah.
And because it got such traction, I ended up writing the book, and the book then got traction. And it's actually quite hilarious that my strategy for becoming a key person of influence was to write a book called Key Person of Influence. It was a very literal approach to moving to the inner circle.
But I know that's what people want to know about. But at what point for you then did you actually feel like you had become a key person of influence?
Probably when I started getting paid to speak. I think the kind of some of the breakthrough moments for me, I mean, I was speaking at my own events, obviously, but then there was times where people would start emailing and saying, hey, we've got a conference and we'll pay you, silly money to come and speak at the conference. And it was like, oh, wow. Okay. And getting paid to speak around the world and, those kind of things. And also people coming up and asking for a signed copy of the book is pretty special. I can tell you, that if you've got even, anything less than being a Zen monk, and having your ego completely in check, but there's something very nice when someone comes up and says, hey, I love your book. Could I get a signed copy? And it's like, whoa, yes, that's, I always act cool, but on the inside, I'm like really kind of glowing.
I can well imagine. I can put myself in that position, and I would be pretty thrilled myself. And so that's a great place to get to. But so you kind of followed your own process and wrote about it and kind of became a key person of influence from doing that process. One of the things that you talk about in there that I think did actually really hit with me was about writing a book. And I've heard some professional speakers talk about this as well. It's a similar kind of philosophy, I think, of that having a book is the best business card you could ever have. I think you kind of say something very much the same effect in your book.
Yeah, it's the best business card. Well, one of the sayings that has kind of like a lot of people like, I say that the book that changes your life the most is not one you read, it's one that you write. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So one reason is that a book is an amazing, I'd say it's beyond a business card, actually. It's far more than a business card. It's almost like a salesperson or a business development manager who's out there meeting people. Whereas a business card might have your contact details, your book has your whole story and it has your whole value proposition and it has your whole, it typically will have case studies and stories and insights and data and research. And if people read the book, typically a well-written book, people put down the book and they think, gee, I'd love to do something with this person. I recently actually read a book that I immediately got in touch with the author and booked 5 coaching sessions with them and said, I'd love to, I looked on the website, noticed that they do coaching sessions and said, yeah, great. I'd love to do some coaching sessions with you. So, I just thought, great, this is a great, now this person's on the other side of the world and they're going to be doing some coaching with me around fitness. And, sort of health and wellness and fitness and stuff. And it's like, that's the power of a book. How would that, prior to having a book, how would that person in Texas pick up a client in London, who's super pumped to talk? So, I have a client call tonight where someone's booked me to do a call with them, a chain of clinics in California. And I do that call at 8 p.m. till 10 p.m. tonight so that we're on the right time zone for California. And we're doing some work with their leadership team, and how did that happen? Because of the book. Yes.
So, I mean, it can't just be any old book, right? You mean it has to be something that's giving value and that people are like going to read it and think, I definitely want to work with that person. They know what they're talking about.
Yeah, there's a certain formula to writing a book. You want to really convey, you've got to be able to put your best foot forward. You've got to, I think the textbook style book doesn't really have that wow factor. If it kind of looks like just a book that, anyone could have compiled the research and, here's the stock standard, answers. It's got to have a little bit of a spin to things. It's got to be your take on things, your unique perspective. It needs to tell your story and share a little bit about you and what you've been through. And, it has to have that little bit of spice in the book where it tells the reader who you are and what you've achieved. Now this brings up another issue. A lot of people say, well, that's all well and good if you've captained a rugby team or if you've, floated your company for $1 billion. But, what about for ordinary people? Now, I've been working with thousands of people over the last 10 years, many of whom have written books. And one thing that we've discovered is this concept called the mountain of value. And the mountain of value is if you imagine that you climb up to the top of a mountain and you're standing on top of this huge mountain, you can actually see the entire horizon, everything around you. But the one thing you can't see is the mountain.
Right.
And what I use to describe what I'm saying there is that when you're standing on a mountain of value, which many of our listeners will be, to you, it seems pretty mundane and it seems pretty boring. It's like, oh, well, of course, yeah, I've done some award-winning projects, or I've done that interesting little thing, or even I've had a failure. I've been punched in the face and I had that real setback and I had to recover from that. And actually that could be incredibly valuable to a reader. It's, people don't only want to read books by billionaires and sports stars. They want to actually read books by people who they can relate to. The whole idea is that, maybe I don't want to read a book by an athlete. Maybe I want to read a book by a father of four who has to fit fitness in around having kids and, type thing.
It's interesting because it's reminding me of a conversation I had with a guy called Matthew Dix, who's an award-winning storyteller and writes about storytelling as well as being a successful fictional author as well. And he was saying similar kinds of things about telling stories, and that some people think they don't have a story to tell, and it's that sort of blind spot of our own lives, just thinking that our experience is mundane and not going to be that interesting to anyone. But when you actually start to unpack it, there's nearly always something there. But also that the most powerful stories aren't always the most wildest things that have ever happened. Like this guy, I think, has had two sort of close to death experiences and survived them, that aren't necessarily the most interesting things. That the most powerful stories are often the most just sat around the dinner table at home with the family and having a moment of realization. And that makes it much more relatable to a wider audience who's thinking, well, I can't ever relate having been in a car crash and thrown through the window. No. but I can relate to sitting around the table with my family and having those kinds of conversations. So I think that's a different context, but very similar.
Earlier this year, I read a brilliant book called The Surrender Experiment, and the book opens up with this guy saying that when I was 23 years old, the most incredible thing happened to me, which I was sitting there in the living room having a conversation with a friend, and I noticed that I had an inner monologue. I noticed that I had a voice inside my head commenting on everything that was being said. And once I noticed it, I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand this voice that just wouldn't shut up about everything. And it's funny because the book then goes and talks about meditation practice, and it talks about being able to quieten the mind and all this sort of stuff. But it was hilarious because his big breakthrough moment, the big bang moment of the book, is sitting in a living room having a conversation and noticing his inner monologue. It was not being thrown through a windscreen or anything. But it's interesting because it's an incredibly captivating book, this particular book, and it's a lot of ordinary experiences, but he unpacks them really well. I want a flip side on that. And the flip side is I work with a client who is a Paralympic world record holder, gold medal Paralympic athlete, phenomenal guy, has a kind of blindness, and he's also a cycling champion. So he does this tandem bike riding. And when I talk to him about, being at the Olympics and, Team GB and being in Brazil and being in China and representing the country and all that sort of stuff, he sort of says, well, it is just a bike race. And, what you do, Daniel, is really interesting. But, what I do, it kind of, it's interesting for a few days once every 4 years, but it's really quite mundane for most of that time. And it's kind of hilarious. In his mind, what he does is really kind of dull and tedious, with a few high points, and that I'm doing really interesting stuff. And I'm sitting there looking at him going, it's incredible what you do. And, and we kind of bring out the best in each other by kind of reflecting back and saying, don't devalue your story. It's amazing stuff.
Yeah. And it's often what makes you more accessible to other people as well. Is what people want to get. But yeah, we have that tendency, like we tend to see things just from our perspective and think that other people know what we know, or have more interesting lives than we do. It's very hard to see what's not inside your head sometimes. But,
yeah, completely.
Yeah. Coming back then to the key person of influence stuff, and one of the things that I focus on a lot in my podcast is about public speaking skills. In fact, my work is teaching and training public speaking skills as well. everyone has their own journey to becoming a speaker, and you started getting on the stage when were you doing your events? Was that the first time you ever did any kind of public speaking? And I'd just like to hear a bit more about your development, because you're someone who regularly does speaking events now.
So at first I was doing roadshow marketing, and my business Triumphant Events really focused on this roadshow concept. But it was all behind the scenes. It was actually, my job was filling rooms and coordinating the roadshow. Almost never, I actually, that's not true. What I did do is I would often introduce the first speaker. So I would, hi, I'm Daniel. I'm the founder of Triumphant Events, and we've brought you here and we've organized this event, and our team is here and our fire exits are here and our lunch breaks will be at this time and all of that, now to our speaker. So I would often do those kind of just the basic MC kind of role. So I wasn't unfamiliar of what it's like to walk up on stage and see, 200 faces looking up at you. That, I kind of got dipped in for 5 minutes at a time when we were doing that. So I kind of did slightly lose my fear of public speaking just by doing that, on a semi-regular basis. But we were doing a roadshow in 2004 with the CEO of a franchise, and we'd booked, we ended up doing 174 events that year, 2004, 2005. It was like 3 a week for the year. It was incredible, insane, non-stop roadshow that never ended for a year. And we got about 3 or 4 weeks in, and one of the downsides of what I was doing was I would hear the same presentation over and over and over and over. And it was just like, I could do the damn thing in my sleep. Anyway, 3 or 4 weeks in, and I've heard this presentation, I've now heard it 15 times, and I've gotten it, well and truly in my head, and it's a great presentation, and a 2-hour presentation. Anyway, we're running this event on the Gold Coast, and we've got 70 or 80 people at the lunchtime event. We've got 200 at the afternoon evening event, and then we've got another event the following day in Brisbane, and then another day the following event in the Sunshine Coast. And the speaker comes in, and he's not dressed for going on stage. He says, "Daniel, I'm so sorry. My father's been taken to hospital with a heart condition, and I need to go into hospital." And he said, "Look, you know the presentation. You've heard it plenty of times. Can you just do this lunchtime one, maybe the evening one, and just take people through the slide deck while I go to the hospital?" Okay, 2-hour presentation. Okay, let's go with it. So I jump up on stage and I deliver. I just, let people know the CEO's had to go to hospital, but I'll be taking you through the presentation. And lo and behold, we get the exact same result. So the exact same number of people fill in the expression of interest form, and we get the conversion. And then I did it again that night, and we get the conversion again. And the CEO twigged with this immediately, and he says, "Oh, Daniel, you got the exact same result. I guess I don't have to do the presentation anymore." And I went, "Well, if you want to pay me a speaking fee," because bear in mind, I'd done a lot of speaking fees. I'd negotiated a lot of speaking fees in the years. I said, "Well, if you want me to do it, I can free up your time so you don't have to do this anymore. But you'll just need to add a speaking fee to the mix." So he said, "Well, it's worth it. If I don't have to be there, I've got other things I can do. So happy to pay a speaking fee." So I negotiated myself a speaking fee, which I'd never kind of done before. And next thing you know, I'm delivering 3 or 4 presentations a week as a paid speaker, paid presenter. And that year I delivered 174. So it was 2000, and this happened in 2004, and then 2005 we did 174 events, which I was the speaker for. So it was a baptism of fire.
Yeah.
And immediately I was thrust into speaking in front of audiences regularly in front of audiences of 100 to 500 people.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like being sort of pushed into a position where you really don't have a lot of option to sort of push yourself to actually go and do it and go for it and make it happen. And it seemed like that worked out incredibly well.
Yeah, well, it was phenomenal. And it meant that we really controlled, from my point of view, it meant we controlled the whole process end to end, and we could charge an enormous amount of money for what we did with clients.
Yeah.
It gave me a view of how the whole business ran, and meant we could control the whole business. And that was essentially the key from going from 1 million a year to 1 million a month.
Mm.
So it was
Yeah. So in your speaking, at some point, you made the transition then from someone else's presentation to presenting your own materials. When
yeah, well, kind of. When I first came to London, I was presenting Roger Hamilton's materials, Wealth Dynamics, and I actually ended up touring the world, speaking in dozens of countries about wealth dynamics. So I gave Roger's presentation. So right up until that point, I just didn't have the confidence that I had anything presentation worthy myself. I would learn someone else's presentation and deliver it on stage. And part of the value that we could offer to a client was that we could literally free them up completely from a whole bunch of the work, a whole bunch of what they wanted, what they were doing. So Roger had created Wealth Dynamics, and I literally flew around the world presenting Wealth Dynamics all over the world, and also in the UK. So it was this kind of, that was my next major speaking experience, being a global speaker presenting someone else's work.
I think that was where I first encountered you at an event at I think it was Earl's Court Exhibition Centre or something like that. But,
it could have been that. Yeah, it was that sort of thing. Was it myself or was it Roger?
Well, both. I already had met Roger before that, so I think maybe I'd been to another event before that, but that was the event where I first actually first remembered meeting you. So
yeah, so that was at that particular time. Didn't have any content myself, just purely parroting someone else's content, but building confidence as a speaker.
Yeah, which is super important and a really good thing to have. I got offered a training position with a company some years ago and had the choice of, could have gone down that path. Didn't look very steady at the time, but I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to say what I wanted to say, and ended up not going down the route where I could see the benefits of it from, as you're saying, like getting into that habit and being conditioned to speaking to a larger room.
Kind of being like a tribute band. A gigging musician who's doing backup musician versus someone who's writing the songs and performing their own songs. Yeah.
What for you then, in terms of whether it's as a speaker or anyone in public life, what makes somebody a key person of influence other than having their own book?
So in the book, I talk about 5 things. The first one is a pitch. So it's one thing to give a great inspiring talk, but the world of that has kind of moved on. There was these Zig Ziglars of the world and Bob Proctors of the world who literally just turned up. Their product was just talking and giving a canned talk, and they would have their canned 2-hour keynote, and they turned up and they gave this motivational talk. And that very much kind of they got to the height of that model. Most key people of influence have a very clear idea as to what they're pitching. So they're using the stage as a way of leveraging and pitching some sort of big idea. So think Elon Musk launching Cybertruck. Think Steve Jobs or Tim Cook launching a piece of technology from stage. So it's like this. The first question is, what are you going to be up on stage pitching? What idea are you pitching? What is it you want people to go and do? What movement do you want to create as a result of you being on stage? Because even if you are a motivational speaker, let's say, the best of the best are the ones who can pitch people to do something that they weren't going to do prior to hearing you speak. The true measure of a great speaker is they move you to some sort of action that you weren't going to take an hour earlier. So perhaps they inspire you around health and fitness. Maybe they inspire you to take your relationship to a different level. Whatever it is, but they're a brilliant speaker pitches you an idea that makes you do something different that you weren't going to do an hour ago. That essentially is the greatest speaking. You know, if people sort of go, oh, that was entertaining, that was nice, it's great, good showmanship, but it's not that kind of influencer.
Yeah.
So the first one is pitching. The next one is publishing. So we already talked about the book. The book is also a bit of, I will say this, it's a bit of a filter. As an event booker, as an event organizer, someone who's a conference organizer, I don't know why, but there's just this ingrained thing about booking speakers who have a book. And I don't know why that is like this common filter, but try and think of any of the major speakers who don't have a book. Like it's really rare that
if they haven't written it themselves, right?
Yeah, like it's quite rare that the super professional speakers that are right, you know, all the time up on the stage, even the TED Talk, you know, TED Talkers and all that sort of stuff, they're published in some ways. If they're academics, they've written a thesis or a dissertation. Sometimes they're New York Times columnists, but more often than not, they've got a book. Like I'd say something like 90% of the TED Talkers have got books written.
Not before, then definitely afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. After the 1 million views a month is over. So it's a bit of a filter. The third one is a product ecosystem. So one of the things that key people of influence have is a way of making money that is not leveraging their time, so that they can set foot on stage, they can give a great presentation, and then something, if people want to buy something, it's anything but their time. Because as soon as you're into the job of selling purely and simply your time for money, and especially in a linear way, where one client is 1 unit of additional work, you know, and that 10 clients is 10 units of work and 100 clients is 100 units of work. You know, sometimes you might be selling your time, but it's leveraged. So 100 clients is no different to working with 10 clients. So they typically have product so that they can make money through other ways other than just speaking fees. I will say that the age of speaking fees is a little bit complex now. That
it is.
Yeah, pure and
speeches. Yeah.
Yeah, there's very few speakers who can genuinely just say, I'm $5,000 to give a talk. Like that's it. And my full value is you pay me for a keynote and then I give a keynote and then that's it. Like there's very few people, you know, normally it's ex-sporting legends or, you know, like some top academic or something like that. There's very few of them. But the ones who make the most money are the ones who actually can afford to speak for free because if they want to, because they know that the wheels will go spinning in the background. You know, so Elon Musk doesn't charge a speaking fee. He turns up and he sells $10 billion worth of Cybertrucks.
Yeah.
So product, profile. I define profile very simply as you are who Google says you are. So if I Google you and a bunch of really good stuff comes up and I can see you've got a tribe and a following and you've got good things on page 1, 2, and 3 of Google, that tends to be, yeah, okay, this is a good person I want on stage. What you do not want if you're an event organizer, you don't want anyone who's got any controversy around them. You don't want a speaker who you Google them and, you know, there's some sort of fight raging around them. There's haters and there's people who are polarized around them. You want a nice, smooth event and you just want a good, clean, good quality profile. So that when your people are thinking about buying a ticket to the event and they Google the speakers, it's like, oh yeah, these look like great speakers. I'm looking forward to the event. So profile is about having a nice, it doesn't mean you've got 1 million followers on Instagram or that you're a New York Times, you know, columnist or something like that. It's just that if I Google you, it's full of really good stuff, reaffirming who you are. And then partnership is the ability to bring more to the table, not just yourself, the ability to bring in partners, the ability to have relationships that form strategic joint ventures, product partnerships, brand partnerships, all of that sort of stuff really makes you a key person of influence. So those are the 5 Ps: pitch, publish, product, profile, partnership. And when you have those 5 Ps in place, you very rapidly kind of move to that inner circle of the industry.
Yeah, and do all of the 5 pieces need to be there, do you think?
They tend to multiply against each other. So as with any multiplication, if any multiplication series is a 0, it kind of zeroes off everything else. So you might have some that are stronger and weaker than others, but it tends to be that, if you've got a weakness and you bring it up, it multiplies against the whole rest of, the weakness. So for example, there's this guy called Jay Shetty who has 50 million followers on, he's a friend of mine. I actually knew him when he was just starting out, which was kind of cool. I used to meet him in Euston Station, like back before he was famous. And, but today he's got like 50 million followers on social media. He's got 7 million Instagram followers. He's got all that, but he's only just putting his book out at the moment. So his book goes live this week, and he hadn't published that book. But watch what will happen. What will happen is that hundreds of thousands of people are going to buy that book. They're going to read that book, and it's going to galvanize who he is to them. So they have a superficial relationship with him currently, looking at his Instagram feed. But as soon as they read that book, suddenly they go, oh wow, I'm loyal to this guy. I want to know more about him. I won't just turn up if he's in town. I'll pay to turn up if he's in town, because I've read the book. So what I'm expecting to see is in the year ahead, he will actually go right up a whole other level as he gets 100,000 true fans.
What was the hardest part about writing your first book for you?
Writing is just hard. Writing's hard. It's just terrible. It's hours and hours and hours and hours of work that punches you in the face of like, oh, that doesn't look very good, and that's pretty shit, and you haven't really thought you knew a thing or two about that, and now we're 500 words in and you've said everything that you think you know about that, in that particular chapter. So it's hard, and it's hard and it's challenging. And you get no rewards. 99% done pays no dividends. You get no points for effort in the writing. So you might spend a year writing something and then you publish it. And actually the rewards typically come 6 to 12 months after you publish. So the hardest point is that it is a project of delayed gratification, really, really delayed gratification. And you get no points right up until the end.
Yeah. And publishers and even writers will often say writing a book isn't generally going to make you rich in itself.
Yeah, exactly. So it's you really have to understand where it fits in your business.
Yeah.
So for example, I believe that the older model was authors trying to sell books, and the new model is books trying to sell authors. So
right.
do you know the reason? So the top secret behind the scenes expose secret of me is that I actually gave away thousands of books. So when I had even when I first had a book out, I didn't even try and sell the damn thing. I printed thousands of them and I just gave thousands of them away. Because in my mind, do you know how I actually thought about it? I thought about it that each book is a cup of coffee. So I would think to myself, and this happened to me because one of my speakers who I ended up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars with, I had bumped into him at a conference. He knew I was a conference organizer, and he said, Daniel, I would love for you to consider me as a speaker at your events. Can I send you some books? And I said, yeah, sure. And he sent me this beautiful package with all these books that he had written. He had written 10 books, and he sent me the whole bundle all wrapped up, and a handwritten card and everything. And I actually skimmed through his books, and I ended up booking him for hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work over the coming years. And I remember he just kicked the relationship off with a free book. He sent me through the book. And I remember thinking to myself, if I was to, like, John, if I met you at Home House, right, Members Club in London, and I said, oh, John, I'd love to buy you a coffee. Of course I would. And of course I would happily buy a coffee, and it would be £3.50 plus my time and all that sort of stuff. There's not even a question that I would happily sit down, buy you a coffee and talk through what I'm up to. But how do you leverage that, right? If you meet 4 people a day, that's only 1,000 people a year. So then I thought to myself, well, actually a book is like a cup of coffee. If there's anyone in the world that I would happily sit down and have a cup of coffee with and buy them a cup of coffee and chat, I'm going to send them a book. So in the first year, I think I sent out maybe 2,000 or 3,000 books. And it was like for me, it was this opportunity to have 2,000 or 3,000 cups of coffee without it taking any of my time.
You got to be impressed. I think anyone who says that, oh, you meet them for the first time, say, oh, hey, I've got a book. Why don't you have a copy of my book? I think that's always impressive. Even if you've only had a part in writing the book, it's still impressive, because most of us aren't published, and most people don't have their own books out there or their names that well known. So it's really important.
Yeah.
Is there anyone you think that the key person of influence strategy wouldn't work for?
I mean, we have worked with 50 different industries plus. We've worked with 3,000 clients. We've worked with vets, academics, sporting stars. We've worked with celebrities. We've worked with who already had a following. We've worked with IT computer people, AI people. We've worked with leading doctors and dentists. So, I'm kind of at the point now where, it's just a good best practice across industry to position yourself as a key person of influence. Can you think of anyone?
Not really. I think it could work with pretty much anyone in any industry, apart from anyone who doesn't really want to be known.
Yeah, look, the only one is if there were serious skeletons in your closet, and you absolutely know that you're going to get exposed for that fraud that you ran, that pyramid scheme, that Ponzi scheme that you kind of, I suppose. And maybe if you're making money hand over fist with some extreme niche. Actually, here's a good answer. Other than the Ponzi scheme person who's got a big skeleton in their closet, if you were genuinely making money hand over fist with a particular niche that you do not want people to know about, and you want to stay extremely quiet and not attract any competition, occasionally that happens. And of course, if that's the situation, you just want to shut up and be very quiet and have a Honda that you drive to work and a Porsche for the weekend. But so I have come across a few people who've actually said to me, Daniel, I want to be anything but a key person of influence. I want to keep quiet because what I'm doing is working extremely well, and I don't really want to signal to the market that they should come and compete.
One of the things, I mean, that's a great answer, and I can see that works as well. But one of the things that I often say to people, because of working in the world of presentation skills and public speaking, is that we are now in an age where we are in the AI revolution, and it's already happening. It's already going on. So many of the roles and jobs that exist today will, over time, as is already happening, be replaced by algorithms or by robots. And so, Andres Oppenheimer, in his book, The Robots Are Coming, he says that the two areas that are definitely protected and still growing at the moment are education and entertainment. And then, if you've got something that kind of crosses those two as well, then you're in a winner. And I think that's one of the things that makes public speaking, or even being an author, very relevant right now. Is like, if you want to stay relevant in the business world, you have to become more well known. You have to be informing and to some degree entertaining people, not necessarily making them laugh, but educating in some way to really stay relevant and to still have something that's worth knowing about. Because over time, who knows what's going to come in terms of new businesses and new jobs because of AI, but at least for now, we know that education and entertainment are still growth industries. Yes
and no. Look, behind me is a painting that was created by a robot, and it's a humanoid robot that is programmed with an algorithm from Oxford University to emulate creativity and to come up with new things on its own. And it's called Ada, Ada as Ada the robot. And basically, so if anyone listening, they want to Google and see what's behind me, it's Ada the robot is the artist. Here's the issue with education and entertainment. One great educator and one great entertainer can now look after 1 billion people pretty easily. This is a problem that we're moving into. If you think about 100 years ago, had Alicia Keys been a singer 100 years ago, she would have been in a piano bar in New York playing to audiences of 50 people at a time. And there is absolutely no possible way in hell that she could have been simultaneously playing to an audience in London and an audience in Sydney and an audience in Singapore. Even though she's got a cracking good voice, she could only play to 50 people at a time. Today, if you've got a voice like Alicia Keys, you can play to 1 billion people a day, or millions of people a day all over the world on their time scale, whenever they want, wherever they want. So you actually don't need all that many amazing, talented musicians. A few hundred musicians can keep the whole world entertained. The problem is that what we're seeing is a phenomenal science teacher will actually be creating lessons on YouTube that hundreds of thousands of students will be loving their take on how to do it and all that sort of stuff. You've got to be surfing this wave. You've got to be ahead of the curve. We're going to see a polarized society going forward where essentially there's going to be more haves and have-nots, less of a blend of that middle class doing well despite not being terribly special. You're actually going to see the middle class in the Western world competing with people in Turkey and Philippines and Indonesia and Pakistan and India, all of those kind of places that have lots of young, talented, educated people who are quite happy for $75 a day to be doing a professional white collar kind of job. So you're going to have a lot of people competing for that, more than ever.
For some reason, you're making me think of The Incredibles, that thing of like, if everyone has superpowers, then no one's special.
Totally. Yeah. This is the thing. I mean, I personally think that the kind of last industries are going to be hairdressing. At what point will we let a robot cut our hair?
But I've seen these machines in Singapore. I think was the last place I saw them. These robot hairdressers. I wouldn't do it myself, but yeah, they're already. I'm sure
that they'll create it. I'm not sure I'd let a humanoid robot near me with some scissors.
No, I don't think I would.
But
I've watched Space Odyssey too many times. I don't trust them.
Yeah, exactly. But the real trick at the moment is, imagine it like this. Imagine in the 2010s, here's a visual. Imagine that there's these railway tracks that have been put down, and there's these incredible railway tracks going out to the world that if you want to, you can stick something on those railway tracks and they'll just go whoosh, straight down to Africa, straight down to Australia, off to New Zealand. And someone's gone and spent the money and the time to lay down those tracks where whatever you want to get out to the world, there is now this base infrastructure to do it. And you're either going to leverage that or you're not going to leverage that. And essentially, when you're doing something that's small and localized and non-digital, and realistically, your business model can serve a limited number of people in a limited number of locations, you're essentially not leveraging those railway tracks. But as soon as you say, okay, I'm going to have a product that can go anywhere in the world. I'm going to have a book that can go anywhere in the world. I'm going to create content that can go anywhere in the world. I'm going to release videos and podcasts and all of that sort of stuff. You might not be the most famous person in the world, right? You might not be Justin Bieber or something like that. But even if you end up with 3,000 people who absolutely adore what you do and happy to subscribe to something, you're actually going to be pretty bulletproof. With a global following of people who quite like you and quite like what you're doing, provided you're leveraging those railway tracks. But as soon as you say, look, I'm stuck, I only do it in Manchester, and I only, I'm a local model. I only do it in person. I don't release any of my stuff online. I produce a product or service, and I build websites for people. That's it. It's like, okay, unfortunately, those railway tracks go both ways. And that person who's in Turkey, that person who's in the Philippines, they're going to be happily shipping work from there to here at a fraction of the price.
So the best time to think about becoming a key person of influence would be right now.
Well, the best time was 2009,
Right. So the
and
next best
the
time.
second best time is right now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's always the sooner the better. But yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, that market conditions are going to change, and a lot of people are going to be moving in the same sort of direction. I mean, a similar thing happened to me when I started in coaching. Like it got to a point where like recession was hitting, and suddenly all sorts of people were calling themselves coaches. You had no right, no right to be calling themselves coaches. And then it's just like the market got swamped, and it took a while for all
For that chop to come
yeah,
out.
for it all to clear, and not everyone survived the purge, if you like. But
Yep.
yeah, then the industry kind of calmed down again when people realized actually not anyone can be a coach,
Yeah.
and not everyone can be successful at it.
That it's not such a commoditized thing, that there's a vast difference in quality. Yeah.
Other than unethical practices that you mentioned before, what are the things that people are perhaps getting wrong sometimes in creating or becoming key people of influence that you may have seen?
Um, so there's what I call functional behavior or functional tasks, and there's vital tasks. So the definition of the word functionality is along the lines of performing a task, being able to repeat the task, having a functional working knowledge of what you do. If you're a photographer, it's functionally knowing what f-stops are and apertures and shutter speeds and how to light a room and the rule of thirds and all that sort of stuff. So that's the functional skill set of being a photographer. The word vital has two meanings, which is life force. So if something's full of vitality, it's got life force, and also irreplaceable. If something's vital, you can't really replace it. You can't do without it, that vital organ. So there's this set of skills, which is the irreplaceable life force skills. And all of school, your entire life has been about accumulating functional skills. And what actually pays the bills at a certain point is not more functionality, it's more vitality. So the people who have the ability to become the irreplaceable life force of something, those are the ones who actually make a ton of money, and the functional people organize themselves around those people. So what people do wrong is they focus on more functionality, and it's kind of like, oh, well, I'll get a master's in finance, and I'll get an MBA, and I'll do that work myself, and I'm a really great dentist, so I'll do the dentistry myself. And I'm a really great web developer, so I'll do the web developing myself, and like I'll just do all the things. I mean, even if you run it to the full extent, there are people who do jobs that you could outsource for £10 an hour, £15 an hour. So, I've actually seen entrepreneurs who build themselves out at £800 a day, spending a day doing their own accounting and bookkeeping, and they spend time, responding to endless emails, and they spend time doing their own social media. And I sit there and I go, you could have a social media manager on £100 a week. You could have a bookkeeper on £100 a week. You could have, you could literally have 3 or 4 people on £100 a week and free yourself up completely of all that stuff. And you'd probably actually have the net effect, not just of having more days to sell, but you probably end up increasing your day rate from 800 to 1200 because you're now just that little bit more energized than everyone else. Yeah. And sometimes you look at these people who make a lot of money and you think, what is it that they do? Like, why are they getting so much paid so much different? What they do is they bring people together. The thing doesn't happen without them. You might sit there and say, is this particular DJ, let's say Fatboy Slim, is Fatboy Slim so much better than every other DJ? Is it that he has functional skills that other DJs don't have? It's like, no, but he's Fatboy Slim. He if he's there, 10,000 people are going to show up. He's got the name, he's got the brand, he's got the reputation, he's got the connections, he's got the partnerships he can pull together. If you book him behind the scenes, he can pull together a whole bunch of people. He can have a lot of people who'll promote the event because he's going to be there. So it's the actual non-functional stuff that really makes the money, not the functional DJing skills. It's the intangible stuff that we've never been trained at school about. So the concept of vitality is so foreign to us. If you've come through school and university, this idea that there's this entire different set of skills that have nothing to do with functionality is like a weird concept. But that's what people do wrong. The number one thing they do wrong, and here's some practical stuff. Stop cleaning your damn house. Like, get a cleaner. Like, get a cleaner and pay the cleaner for 4 or 5 hours a week to come in and do the cleaning. And while they're there, while they're in your house, use that as a trigger to sit down and write up your case studies. Write an amazing blog that you're going to share on LinkedIn. Figure out what your method is and your model is. Take that amazing piece of work that you did and enter it for an award. And, while the cleaner is cleaning your house, you are going to use that time to do something of high value that will set you up in the future. And that simple concept of outsourcing something functional while you focus on something vital, that brings some life force into the business. That concept, you can blow that right up to the size of Microsoft and get the same sort of idea. But that kernel of the idea is hire a cleaner and write a blog while they're there. That idea is what most people should be doing. And here's the thing, if you think you know it, but you don't have a cleaner, and if you think you know it and you still respond to your own emails, and if you think you know it and you still do your own bookkeeping, you don't yet know it.
Good advice indeed. I have one question more that I have to ask about Key Person of Influence, about your book, about the underlying theme. And maybe you get asked about this quite often.
Well, it's good. It tells me that people have actually read the book.
Okay, well, I'm still a little uncertain whether it's just a very clever device to get people to reread the book, or whether there is actually an underlying theme in the book.
So there's no underlying theme in the book. What I'm referring to when I talk about the underlying theme, and for anyone who's not read the book, I open the book with the introduction, and I finish the introduction by saying, by the way, there's an underlying theme that you should pay attention to. And if you figure out this underlying theme, you're going to get a burst of energy. You're going to get super creative, and you sit up all night, won't feel tired, and you'll just flow with ideas and information and inspiration if you notice the underlying theme. If you don't notice the underlying theme, a lot of what will be in this book will be fairly pedestrian. And it kind of makes people go, what? Like, what kind of weird wizardry are you hinting at here, Daniel? So here's the thing. There's no underlying theme in the book. The idea behind the underlying theme is that it's in your life. So there's a theme of, there's a kernel of something that happened in your origin story pre-age 10 or pre-age 15. There's something else that there's a moment of empowerment that happened before 20. There's a moment of empowerment that happened between 20 and 25. And all of it clusters around a similar idea. For me, having a garage sale when I was 10 years old, that first spark of entrepreneurial, it was actually sparked by a house fire where everything was water damaged or smoke damaged. And then I turned something negative into a positive through entrepreneurship. And there was something in that. And then there was another similar experience that was about the Boy Scout group that I was part of. And we had to raise money to fix a problem with the Scout Hall. And then there was this theme of problems happening, like problems that were negative and everyone was upset about. And then an entrepreneurial solution came and solved the problem. And for me personally, when I discovered that my theme is entrepreneurial solutions to big problems, and that the world's biggest problems could be solved with entrepreneurial mindset and entrepreneurial solutions. And then I kind of put language around that, which is I develop entrepreneurs to stand out, scale up, and make a dent in the universe. And I created a company around this idea of entrepreneurs solving meaningful problems. And the whole vibe of why we called the company Dent is Steve Jobs saying, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, why not try and make a dent in the universe? Do something meaningful. So for me, it was about discovering that this theme that goes right back to kind of age 10 at least is running, which is entrepreneurship, solving meaningful problems. And when I got that, when I went, wow, my origin story lines up with my mission, lines up with my vision, then it's like this alignment, energetic alignment. And And from energetic alignment, you know when you're energetically aligned because you have a burst of creativity. So you suddenly feel like the stars aligned. You feel like your body's aligned. You feel like your mind and your body have kind of like tingle into the same space. And then you go, woo, and suddenly 8,000 words comes out. And you go, wow, I'm just in the zone. So what I wanted to spark as an idea with that underlying theme is just purely and simply go looking in your own story, see if you can identify the theme, because it's that story that's going to be the key to unlocking the real value you've got to offer.
It's great to have an answer to that question, and one I can very much relate to as well. It's been kicking around my head for a few years now. So.
Hopefully it's a satisfying answer.
Oh yes, oh very much so.
As opposed to the underlying theme is 37. Number 37 appears 37 times.
Well, we'll take it away and ruminate on it still, but yes. For other than your own books, is there a book that you would always recommend people to read?
Well, getting back to what we were saying before, other than my books, the book that changes your life the most is the book you write, not the book you read. So I'm always, people say, what other books would you recommend? And I keep saying, there comes a point where you've got to stop reading and start writing. You've got to stop consuming and start creating. You get paid for what you create and you get nothing for what you consume. I met this amazing book reviewer, and she has a whole, she reads a book a week, and she's like super into she's got a whole method about how she reviews books and how she, kind of skims the book first, and then she delves deep, and then she writes a review, and then she reads reviews again. And it turns out she's read dozens, if not 100+ business books, and hasn't actually done anything with it. And I'm sitting there going, if reading books changed your life, she would definitely be a candidate for being a billionaire, right? Because she's really geeking out on reading books. But I know people who have written a book, it's done really, really well. It's changed their life, and they don't read all that much. They're just out there doing it. So, the big message, and I know, look, there are great books I could recommend, but I just want to slap people in the face and say, enough reading, time to write a book. If you've not written a book, or even if you've not written your second book, enough reading, time to write. The book that changes your life the most is not one you read. It's going to be one that you write.
I think that's probably a great place to wrap things up on today. When I do finish my first full book, I'll be sending you a copy.
Brilliant.
hope you might read it. But Daniel, I just want to say thank you so much for giving up your time today and coming and sharing so much great value and information. And it's been a pleasure and a privilege to chat with you. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed the show. It really was good to get an answer to that question about the hidden meaning in the book Key Person of Influence. That's been bugging me for the longest time. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please make sure you subscribe and like and leave a comment as well. YouTube likes that kind of thing. It's been really great having you come and listen. If you think you'd make a great guest for the show, or you know someone who would, please get in touch. John@presentinfluence.com is my email address. You can also find me on Matchmaker FM and on LinkedIn. So come and connect with me and let me know who would be good to have on the show. If you're enjoying the show, if we can make any improvements. We're back next week with more amazing guests, continuing things like the series in humor and presentations, storytelling, and much, much more. See you again for another Speaking of Influence very soon.